Amara Khalid thought she was stepping into the greatest love story of her life, but Selim Yildiz had already written a script she never saw coming. Rania Almasi sensed danger long before Amara boarded that flight, yet even she couldn't imagine how deep the deception ran. When Fahad Rehman uncovered the truth behind Selim's identity, the entire story twisted into something darker than anyone expected. And lurking behind it all was Derya Karaca, pulling strings from the shadows with chilling precision. Every step Amara took toward her dream dragged her deeper into a trap built on lies, fear, and calculated manipulation. What happened next didn't just break her trust, it shattered everything she believed about love, safety, and human intentions. This isn't just a story. It's a descent into a nightmare that no one saw coming. Amara Khalid had always believed in love at first sight, though hers had never happened in the real world. Her days were spent in a predictable routine in Lahore, working at a small design studio, scrolling through social media, dreaming of something bigger, something extraordinary. Life felt ordinary, almost gray, until the day she met Selim Yildiz online. At first it was casual, simple message here, a smiley there, but soon his words began to feel like poetry, carefully crafted to draw her in, to make her believe he understood her better than anyone else ever had. Every message he sent carried a promise of adventure, of love, of a life that was far removed from the monotony she had known. Selim's charm was subtle but powerful. He shared pictures of himself in exotic places, snapshots of cafes in Istanbul, beaches bathed in golden sunlight. Moments that seemed ordinary but carried the thrill of faraway lands. Amara's heart raced every time she saw them, imagining a life where he was real, not just pixels on a screen. Nights were spent staring at her phone, rereading his messages, feeling an intimacy that she couldn't explain. It wasn't just attraction, it was a connection she believed was destined. She told herself she was careful, that she would meet him with eyes wide open. Yet deep down, the hope in her chest refused to let her see the cracks in the story he was weaving. Says attention was constant, almost obsessive. He asked about her day, her dreams, her fears, each question pulling her closer. About Dubai, as if it were a magical city built for lovers like them. He painted vivid pictures of them walking hand in hand along gleaming streets, dining at elegant restaurants, laughing under the warm glow of city lights. Amara's imagination filled in every detail, making the dream feel tangible. Bits of her life with him that she had never shared with anyone. She told him about her family, her work, the little joys and struggles of her daily life. And Selim responded with empathy, understanding, and just the right amount of flirtation that made her pulse quicken. Her friends noticed the change. Rania Almasi, in particular, grew concerned. She had always been the cautious voice in Amara's life, the one who reminded her to pause and think before diving headfirst into something uncertain. Rania asked questions, probed gently about Selim's background, his family, his intentions. But Amara dismissed her concerns, telling herself that love required risk, that sometimes the heart needed to leap before the mind could catch up. Each warning only fueled her determination. The more Rania expressed doubt, the more Amara felt the need to prove that she was capable of recognizing true love. Weeks passed. Messages turned into video calls, and video calls into hours of late-night conversations. Selim's voice became a melody she craved, its laughter, a sound she replayed in her mind when she felt lonely. He shared little details of his life that seemed authentic, convincing her that he was real, that this connection was genuine. The stories he told made Dubai feel closer, more inviting. He spoke of meeting her at the airport, of finally holding her hand after months of waiting. Every word planted a seed in her mind. This was not just a fantasy. It was about to become reality. The moment came when Amara could no longer resist. She booked her flight, her heart a chaotic mix of excitement and fear. Each step of the planning felt like preparing for a dream she didn't want to wake from. She told herself that nothing would go wrong, that love this strong could not be a lie. As she packed her bags, she glanced at her phone one last time, reading Selim's final message before departure, a promise that he would be there, waiting, ready to start their new life together. She boarded the plane with hope clinging to her, completely unaware that the man she had trusted most was already setting the stage for the nightmare that would follow. The moment Amara Khalid stepped off the plane at Dubai Airport, a wave of excitement mixed with anxiety washed over her. The air felt different, hair warmer, busier, filled with a sense of possibility she had never experienced before. Her heart raced as she navigated through the crowd, scanning every face for the one she had been waiting for. Months of messages, calls, and dreams had led her to this exact spot. Every passing second felt like an eternity, every announcement over the loudspeakers echoing like a drumbeat in her chest. She clutched her small bag tighter, rehearsing in her mind what she would say, how she would react when she finally saw him. And then she saw him. Selim Yildiz. Just as in the photos, just as he had promised. He stood near the arrival's gate, holding a bouquet of flowers with a smile that seemed to shine brighter than the Dubai sun. Relief flooded her, mixed with a dizzying rush of joy. He waved, and in that moment, it felt as though the months of distance, of longing, dissolved into nothing. Amara's heart pounded, and for a fleeting instant, the world around them seemed to blur. She rushed forward, eager to close the gap between fantasy and reality. But almost immediately, subtle cracks began to appear. Cracks that Amara was too blinded by love to notice. Selim suggested they go somewhere private before heading to her hotel, claiming it was easier to talk away from the crowds. Tone was gentle, persuasive, and Amara nodded without hesitation. She handed him her passport, trusting him implicitly, because he had always been the voice of reason, the anchor in her whirlwind of emotions. That small act, so innocent on the surface, was the first step into a trap that would unravel her life. As they left the airport, Selim's charm shifted into a controlling subtlety. He began pointing out the streets, the cars, the bustling crowds, narrating details as though he was showing her a world she could not navigate alone. At first, Amara felt grateful. It seemed considerate, even romantic. But as the hours passed, a small unease crept into her mind. He insisted on taking alternate routes, avoided the hotel she had pre-booked, and grew increasingly firm about certain plans that she hadn't agreed to. Every refusal she attempted was met with gentle persuasion, with reasoning that made her question her own doubts. Her phone, her lifeline to the outside world, seemed to lose signal at the most inconvenient moments, and Selim offered to fix it for her. He was always calm, always reassuring, making her feel that every small inconvenience was temporary and that she had nothing to worry about. But inside, a knot of anxiety began to form. She started noticing slight inconsistencies in his stories. The vague explanations for why certain tasks had to be done in secrecy. Yet each time the doubt surfaced, it was buried under the tidal wave of relief and happiness she felt at finally being with him. By the time evening approached, Dubai's glittering skyline seemed to mock her excitement. Selim's behavior became increasingly controlling. He began asking for money, citing urgent problems he claimed could not wait: bank transfers, family emergencies, legal issues back in Turkey. Amara's attempts to reason with him, to check the validity of his claims, were subtly undermined. Each step she took to protect herself was skillfully redirected. Each concern brushed off with charm and logic that made her feel guilty for doubting him. Hours at the airport and in the car had eroded the initial thrill of reunion. The warmth in Selim's smile now felt forced, rehearsed, and the bouquet of flowers he had held earlier seemed like a tool to keep her trust. Amara felt a flicker, of fear, the first real pang of what she had ignored for so long. She realized that the dream she had chased across continents might be slipping through her fingers, but the thought of confronting the man she loved was unbearable. She clung to hope, telling herself that love required patience, that perhaps the confusion was temporary. Unbeknownst to Amara, it meant to be the beginning of her dream life was the first chapter of a nightmare, meticulously designed by someone who knew exactly how to exploit trust. Every step, every smile, every persuasive word was part of a plan, one that would soon turn her world upside down. And as she held her bag tightly, following Selim's lead, she had no idea that the life she had imagined at Dubai Airport was about to collapse in ways she could never have anticipated. Once Amara Khalid realized that something felt wrong, it was already too late. Selim Yildiz's charm, once comforting, had begun to twist into control. The moment he held her passport and documents, he subtly shifted the balance of power. Every decision, every movement, suddenly required his approval. At first, it seemed reasonable. He claimed it was for safety, for convenience, for making her stay easier. Still overwhelmed with relief at finally being together, tried to ignore the gnawing unease in her chest. But as the hours ticked by, small alarms began ringing louder and louder. Echoes of warnings she had once brushed off from her friend Rania. The first real shock came when Selim asked her to hand over her bank details. He explained that there had been an urgent issue in Turkey, a family emergency that required immediate transfer. His tone was calm, almost pleading, and Amara, still caught between fear and hope, reluctantly agreed. What started as a few thousand dirhams quickly escalated into larger sums, each time justified by a new crisis. A new story that seemed real only because he delivered it with such confidence. The reality she had imagined of love, of safety, of a shared life began slipping away. Like sand through her fingers, Amara's attempts to reach her family were met with frustration. Selim insisted she leave her phone with him temporarily while he sorted out technical issues. Each attempt to contact Rania or her parents was blocked by excuses. The hotel Wi-Fi was unreliable. The SIM card needed verification. Started gnawing at her, but Selim's calm, measured responses kept her from acting on it. Every time doubt flared, he buried it under promises, gentle words, even flashes of affection that made her question whether she had been imagining danger. Meanwhile, Rania had begun her own investigation. She scoured the internet, piecing together fragments of information about Selim Yildiz. The results were terrifying. Selim's name appeared repeatedly in reports of online love scams targeting women across continents. Every story shared the same pattern: charm, deceit, and the gradual extraction of money, leaving the victims stranded in a foreign land, isolated and vulnerable. Rania's heart raced as she realized that her friend's perfect love story might be one carefully constructed trap. But by the time she tried to warn Amara directly, the messages went unanswered, and the calls were either ignored or intercepted. Selim's manipulation deepened. He introduced new rules, new emergencies, each designed to isolate Amara further. At one point, he told her that she must trust him completely if their relationship was to survive, framing every act of compliance as proof of love. The fear of losing him, of breaking the connection she had waited for, made Amara comply, each step tightening the invisible chains around her. Every glance, every request, every explanation was calculated to maintain control and prevent her from thinking clearly. It wasn't just the money or the documents that were at risk. Selim had also begun planting seeds of psychological control. He questioned her judgment subtly, made her doubt her instincts, and praised her only when she obeyed. The weight of isolation, combined with the pressure to comply, left Amara exhausted, disoriented, and vulnerable. Each day that passed in his presence blurred into the next, a cycle of obedience, fleeting affection, and growing fear. The life she had imagined romance in the glittering streets of Dubai was now a distant memory, replaced by uncertainty and a creeping terror that she could not escape. And then came the first real threat. Selim informed her that unless she provided more money, there would be consequences. The vague, ominous warning terrified her, but it also sparked a spark of clarity. Something in her mind screamed that this was not love. It was control, deception, and danger. The romantic dream that had carried her across continents had morphed into a nightmare that threatened her freedom, her safety, and her future. The man she had trusted implicitly had transformed into a predator, and every step forward now felt like walking deeper into a trap she didn't yet understand fully. Amara felt the walls closing in. The airport excitement and dreamlike happiness completely gone. Each smile Selim gave her now seemed like a weapon, every word a strategy to maintain his grip. She realized that this story, the one she had thought was her fairy tale, was not about love at all. It was about manipulation, betrayal, and a calculated plan to exploit her trust. And as fear settled deep in her chest, one question consumed her. How had she let herself fall so completely into the hands of someone who had no intention of loving her at all? The moment Amara realized she was trapped, panic surged through her like an unstoppable wave. Selim Yildiz had taken control of everything that mattered: her documents, her money, and even her sense of judgment. Every attempt to reach out for help had been blocked, delayed, or manipulated. Fear and desperation had begun to erode the fragile hope that had carried her across continents. She felt utterly alone, far from home, in a city that suddenly seemed cold and threatening instead of magical. The man she had waited for, the man she believed would hold her hand and protect her, was now the source of her fear. But even in the darkest moments, Amara refused to give up completely. A spark of determination drove her to act, and she remembered her friend Rania's warnings. Rania had suspected from the beginning that something was wrong and had started gathering information about Selim. When Amara finally managed to send a discreet message to her, Rania's response was immediate and shocking. Selim Yildiz was not who he claimed to be. He had a history of deceiving women, often in foreign countries, using fake identities, fabricated stories, and emotional manipulation. Each case shared the same pattern: seduction, isolation, financial exploitation, and disappearance. Armed with this knowledge, Amara sought help from a local investigator known for handling complex scams. Fahad Rehman was methodical, precise, unafraid of navigating the dark web of deceit that Selim and his accomplices had created. From the moment he began the investigation, Fahad uncovered layer after layer of deception. Selim was part of a sophisticated network of scammers, and Derya Karaca, a woman based in Turkey, was his partner in orchestrating these elaborate traps. Derya's role was critical. She manipulated online personas, created fake stories, and coordinated with Selim to ensure victims were isolated, emotionally invested, and financially drained before any escape could be possible. As Fahad delved deeper, the scale of the operation shocked Amara. It was no longer just about her. There were dozens of victims, each lured into the same cycle of trust, hope, and betrayal. The precision with which Selim and Derya worked was chilling. They had perfected the art of making someone feel special, of creating a fantasy so convincing that rational thought was silenced. Amara realized that her own excitement, her dreams of romance, had been exploited with a calculated cruelty that left no room for escape until they decided. Every message, every promise, every smile Selim had offered her had been a tool, a weapon designed to trap her in his carefully constructed world. Fahad worked tirelessly, tracing financial transactions, digital footprints, and social media accounts. He discovered that Selim had used her documents to create fake identities, to move money internationally, and even to apply for services in her name. The betrayal went beyond emotional manipulation. It was criminal, invasive, and terrifying in its scope. Amara felt a wave of anger, mixed with fear. The man she had loved was not just a deceiver, he was a predator. Someone who had meticulously studied her desires and weaknesses, and dreams to exploit them. The investigation revealed one of the most chilling truths. Selim and Derya thrived on the illusion of intimacy. They knew exactly how to gain trust, how to isolate, and how to push victims into compliance. Each victim's story mirrored her own hope, trust, and surrender used against them. Amara's heart ached for those women, many of whom had lost everything in faraway countries, just like she almost did. The realization was sobering. She had narrowly avoided complete ruin, and it was only through her courage, Rania's vigilance, and Fahad's expertise that she still had a chance to reclaim her life. As Fahad presented the evidence, Amara's mind raced. She understood now that escaping Selim was only the first step. Exposing him was just as crucial. The nightmare she had fallen into was part of a much larger operation, one that depended on silence and secrecy. Every detail she had experienced: the late-night calls, the sudden emergencies, the manipulation was not a coincidence, but a deliberate, practiced strategy. For the first time since arriving in Dubai, Amara felt a mix of fear and empowerment. She realized that knowledge was her weapon, and action her only path to freedom, even as the truth unfolded. One fact remained painfully clear: the man she had trusted most, the one she had flown across the world to meet, had shattered her life with calculated precision. The betrayal was deep, personal, and haunting. Yet in understanding the scam, in uncovering its architects, Amara began to reclaim not just her safety, but her sense of self. What Selim and Derya had intended to destroy could now become a story of caution, resilience, and survival. The nightmare was not over, but for the first time, she was no longer a passive victim. She was ready to fight back, expose the truth, and warn others before they too fell into the same trap. Amara Khalid sat in a small office in Dubai, her passport photocopies spread across the table, watching as investigators pieced together the final details of the scam that had almost ruined her life. The weight of everything she had endured sat heavily on her chest. Yet beneath the exhaustion, a stubborn ember of determination burned. She had been deceived, used, and manipulated, but she was still here. She was still fighting. And now, for the first time since landing in Dubai, she felt a faint spark of control returning to her hands. The authorities listened carefully as Fahad Rehman presented the evidence he had gathered. Each detail painted a clearer picture of Selim Yildiz and his accomplice. Derya Karaca, their movements, their transactions, their messages, their calculated techniques for trapping victims. The investigators had seen many scams over the years, but something about this one struck deeper. It wasn't only about money. It was about the emotional destruction the perpetrators left behind. Women from different countries, different backgrounds, all manipulated with the same precision. Amara was no longer just another victim. She had become a critical witness in unveiling a larger network. But the most difficult part was yet to come. Selim and Derya had vanished the moment they sensed pressure. The hotel they had used as a temporary base was empty. Their phone numbers were disconnected. Their online profiles, once active and filled with carefully curated photos, had been erased overnight. It was as though they had simply evaporated from the city, leaving behind only traces of pain and unanswered questions. Amara had hoped for a confrontation, for closure, for justice that felt tangible. Instead, she was left with the bitter reality that scammers like Selim were experts at disappearing before consequences could catch up. Still, the authorities didn't give up. Fahad's findings sparked alerts across borders, and reports were shared with Turkish cybercrime units. The international warnings helped slow down Selim and Derya's operations, forcing them into hiding. Their known digital trails became part of surveillance watch lists. Even if they weren't caught immediately, their freedom was no longer as effortless as before. That knowledge gave Amara a strange sense of relief, knowing that her courage had disrupted their cycle of destruction. As the days passed, Amara faced the emotional aftermath she had tried so hard to avoid. She replayed every moment, each message, each call, each promise, and wondered how she could have been so blinded. But Fahad reminded her that scams like these didn't target weakness. They targeted hope, and hope, in the wrong hands, became a weapon. Slowly, she began to understand that what happened to her could happen to anyone willing to trust too deeply. Returning home was another challenge. The airport that had once felt full of dreams now carried memories she wished she could forget. When she finally arrived back in Lahore, Rania was waiting for her, tears in her eyes, relief written across her face. The reunion was emotional, heavy with unspoken guilt and fear, yet it marked the beginning of Amara's healing. She wasn't the same woman who had left. She carried scars, but she also carried strength she never knew she had. Over the following weeks, Amara became determined to share her story. She knew silence only protected those who thrived in the shadows. By speaking out, she hoped to warn others who might be on the verge of falling into similar traps. Her experience spread online through awareness pages, forums, and discussions focusing on digital safety. Women reached out to her, sharing their stories of near escapes, close calls, and heartbreaks. Each conversation made Amara realize how widespread the issue was and how many lives Selim and Derya had quietly damaged. Though the money she had lost couldn't be recovered quickly, and the emotional wounds couldn't be erased overnight, Amara found power in reclaiming her narrative. The story that began as a dream and turned into a nightmare was now becoming a message of caution and resilience. She learned to rebuild her trust, her confidence, and her life step by painful step. The man she had flown across the world to meet had shattered her world, but he had not destroyed her spirit. Instead, she emerged stronger, wiser, and determined to make sure that others never fell into the same trap. Her journey became a warning to thousands, a reminder that behind beautiful words and charming pictures could hide a story of deception waiting to unfold. And as she looked toward her future, one truth echoed clearly: she had survived. The nightmare had tried to consume her, but she had reclaimed her voice and turned her pain into power.